Abraham Lincoln warned that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Would you like to know what's being taught in today's classrooms? Welcome to Say What? With attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. They'll explore the issues facing children, parents, and society as a result of the public schools and the forces behind them. Say What is the radio program of Protect Our Kids, which seeks to inform and equip concerned citizens about the looming crisis in American education. So listen in as your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr., unpack the issues and organizations affecting our children. And now here's your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr.
Always there for these kids. These are our kids, and we need to make sure that we are lifting them up and giving them a path to success. So we are working very hard to make that happen. And because we now, and this shows that representation matters, 10% of the California legislature is now LGBTQ, 12 out of 120. And it's actually mostly not San Francisco, LA. We have queer legislators from all over the state, from the Central Valley, from the Inland Empire, from San Diego. It's an amazing and beautiful tapestry of our community and tapestry of California. And even though we know that so much of the hate directed at our community is happening in other states, unfortunately, it's here in California too. And we know that we have school boards in particular in some very conservative areas that are demonizing and attacking our LGBTQ youth in ways that are so dangerous. And so about a week ago, our caucus, the 12 of us, we said not on our watch, and we introduced legislation to ban these forced outing policies that some school boards are starting to adopt.
That was
because we know that for all of us, a lot of experience in this room in terms of coming out, in terms of when, if, how someone comes out to their parents, that is our decision and no one else's damn business. And we're going to make that clear in the law of the state of California. But as we fight all the nasty people out there who are trying to harm us, and we're going to beat them and we're going to win, let's celebrate. Let's have just a festive and uplifting month. I am so excited about it. Happy Pride, everyone.
That was California State Senator Scott Wiener addressing the LGBT caucus in Sacramento, which, as you just heard, is 10% of the California legislature and growing. Hello, everyone. I'm George Rosca.
And I'm Mark Schneider.
And we want to welcome you to today's episode 168 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including California's never-ending quest to strip parents of their constitutional rights and prey upon that state's most fragile, its children.
That's right, George. As was highlighted by that video earlier this year by Fox News, and as Senator Wiener now believes, if you're a parent, your children belong to the LGBT caucus and their supporters, which are growing, from activist school teachers and medical practitioners to the state's attorney general and governor. And George, they have been incredibly efficient and successful in their aims in taking over the minds and emotions and hearts of our young kids. George, as you know, we've talked about many times in our conferences and in presentations about the long legislative history that California has in promoting LGBTQIA plus rights at the disparagement of parental rights and the health and welfare of our children. This goes back all the way to Governor Gray Davis in the 1990s. And virtually every administration, both Republican, but mostly Democrats, have imposed one law after another, radicalizing our school system. And George, if that was not bad enough, virtually every month of the school year, there is some kind of orchestrated celebration, morals, that past generations of America would not even speak about in polite public company. But now these things are actually being celebrated from September all the way to what Senator Wiener just mentioned is the entire month of June is Pride Month, and every month in between. So children now, more and more, are just completely inundated, week in, week out, by this message that they really belong to the LGBT caucus and its radical aims. And that has recently become even more cemented by a new bill that has recently got passed both houses of the California legislation. And George, of course, what I'm talking about here is Assembly Bill 1955, the Anti-Parental Rights Bill.
That's right, Mark. As you heard in that video up front with Senator Wiener, he was very blunt about the reason why they wrote this bill. And that's because so many parents, and some of those parents who are school board members, have realized that Sacramento is just going to bully their way into every aspect of their lives. And so there have been, I think, at least 7 by now, school districts that have passed either some kind of a parental notification bill. And Senator Wiener was alluding to those as forcing the outing of kids. And of course, they're good at trying to craft their own narrative. Nobody is forcing the outing of any kids. The truth in all of this is that parental rights and that parent-child relationship, it is sacred, and we cannot violate that right. That is a right that is pre-Constitution. That is a natural right, and we've talked about natural rights before and its definition. What Senator Wiener, in fact, is wanting to do is he's wanting to now place a law that supersedes a parent's natural right in his or her relationship to their child. And that's where this is all going south, because school boards have been passing these parental notification policies, but the legislatures up in Sacramento are hating that. And so here they are trying to now impose a state law that would ban these kind of policies from going into effect.
Just to offer a little more context and clarity to what these policies mean, what has been happening over the last 5 years or so is that schools, George, as you mentioned, are passing what we at POK called parental secrecy policies. And these are usually administered at the school or the school district level. And these are policies to instruct school officials that if a child is identifying as a non-biological sex, the school is to hide that gender identity from the child's own parents. In fact, they have a double record-keeping system at the local school where the parents get to see one set of records, which are what a parent would normally expect. But then there's a whole different set of school records that memorialize that child's particular gender identity. So if the child took on a different name or wanted to use different facilities at the school with their non-biological peers, they could do that. And the school would make a record of that. And of course, these things were completely hidden from parents. Well, George, as you know, many school districts had a very strong reaction to these policies, mostly conservative school districts. And they passed in response to these secrecy policies that required school officials, if they discovered that a child was identifying and coming out as a non-biological gender, that they would let the parent know that. This is something that parents should know. And most parents, they want to know what's going on with their kids at the school. Well, these policies, as you mentioned, have passed at least 7 different school districts around the state. Well, as you heard from Scott Wiener, the LGBT Caucus, they couldn't have this. They could not allow a parent to know what's going on with their kids in the school system. And so Assembly Bill 1955 is a reaction to those parental notification policies. And basically, the new law does 3 things. And I'm just going to read these provisions to you. Number 1, a school shall not be required to disclose any information related to a pupil's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to a parent without the pupil's consent. So, George, we're talking about a child that may be as young as 10 or 11 years old. The schools are now forbidden from informing the parents about that child's gender identification. That's number one. Number two, a school district shall not enact or enforce any policy that would require an employee or a contractor to disclose any information related to the pupil's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to any person without the pupil's consent. And number three, any existing policy. So if these parental notification policies have already passed, to the degree that they are inconsistent with AB 1955, they are now outlawed. So whatever consolation or trust that parents had, that the schools would inform them about what's going on with the most intimate details of their children's lives, that confidence is now completely gone.
And just to add a little bit more to that, Mark, this is specifically to any employee or a contractor of a school district and a charter school. So this isn't just public schools, it's charter schools as well. It's to employees and or any contractors of the district. So this is very far reaching.
It's very far reaching, and parents should be so alarmed about what's happening to their public school system, with a force of law run by our California legislatures. In fact, George, as you know, the medical community is increasingly up in arms about what it sees as very dangerous medical protocols that schools are now encouraging their young students to begin engaging in. In fact, very recently, Protect Our Kids signed a declaration that came from the American College of Pediatricians, not to be confused with the American Academy of Pediatricians, which is fully on board with a child's gender identification. Well, the doctors with the American College of Pediatricians recently put out a statement that has just a tremendous amount of research behind it, calling for the alarm over what's called gender affirming care. And we want to play for our audience the actual announcement that was made by certain physicians with the American College of Pediatricians. And I think, George, the video speaks for itself.
Thank you for coming today for the launch of the Doctors Protecting Children Declaration. My name is Dr. Jill Simons. I'm a board-certified pediatrician and the executive director for the American College of Pediatricians. Today, I'm here alongside my colleagues representing the coalition of co-signers of the Doctors Protecting Children Declaration. Our coalition consists of physicians, together with nurses, behavioral health clinicians, other health professionals, scientists, researchers, and public health and policy professionals. And we have serious concerns about the physical and mental health effects of the current protocols promoted for the care of children and adolescents in the United States who express discomfort with their biological sex. This declaration was authored by the American College of Pediatricians, but really it was developed from the expertise of hundreds of doctors, researchers, and other healthcare workers and leaders who, for years, have been sounding the alarm on the harmful protocols that continue to be promoted by the medical organizations in the United States. Despite recent revelations from the leaked WPATH files and the recent release of the final report from the CAST review, these medical organizations have not changed course. So we are calling on these medical organizations of the United States, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry to follow the science and their European colleagues and immediately stop the promotion of social affirmation, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children and adolescents who experience distress over their biological sex. In our declaration, we affirm that sex is a dimorphic, innate trait defined in relation to an organism's biological role in reproduction, male and female. This genetic signature is present in every nucleated somatic cell in the body and is not altered by drugs or surgical interventions. Consideration of these innate differences is critical to the practice of good medicine and to the development of sound policy for children and adults alike. Medical decision-making should be based upon an individual's biological sex. It should respect biological reality and the dignity of the person by compassionately addressing the whole person. We are here defying the claims made by these medical organizations in the U.S. that those of us who are concerned are a minority and that their protocols are consensus. They are not consensus, and we are speaking in a loud, unified voice, enough. We also encourage the physicians who are members of these professional organizations to contact their leadership and urge them to adhere to the evidence-based research now available. This declaration is live on the website, doctorsprotectingchildren.org. Please read it. You can see the impressive coalition of co-signers already on there, and you can sign. I'm now going to turn it over to each of my colleagues standing here with me to introduce themselves and say a few words about the declaration. Note that these courageous leaders represent thousands of doctors and healthcare workers within their organization. Thank you. Dr. Van Mol.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Andre Van Mol. I'm a board-certified family physician. I'm here today representing the Christian Medical and Dental Associations, American College of Pediatricians, and the American Academy of Medical Ethics. Briefly, gender dysphoria is a diagnosis, whereas transgenderism is an ideology. The natural course of gender dysphoria is desistance by adulthood, conservatively in 85% of the cases, unless it is affirmed. Gender dysphoria carries with it the overwhelming probability of underlying mental health issues, adverse family dynamics, adverse childhood experiences, and autism spectrum disorder that usually predate the gender dysphoria itself. The probability of both desistance and underlying mental health and other issues is why watchful waiting, coupled with mental health evaluation and counseling for both patient and family, was once and is increasingly again recognized as the standard of care for minors with gender dysphoria. Systematic literature reviews done in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Finland, and Germany show that so-called gender-affirming healthcare is out of step with the evidence base for gender dysphoric youth. Transition affirmation is not proven to be safe or effective long-term. It does not reduce suicides. It does not repair mental health issues or trauma. Minors cannot give truly informed consent. Children have developing and immature brains. Their minds change often. They are prone to risk-taking. They are vulnerable to peer pressure, and they don't grasp long-term consequences. Refusing to provide gender transition procedures, or so-called gender-affirming healthcare, is non-discriminatory and is appropriate both professionally and scientifically. Withholding unproven interventions is non-discriminatory, and gender-affirming healthcare has neither been shown to be safe nor effective nor of more help than harm. Physicians take an oath to do no harm, and gender-affirming healthcare is documented to lead to harm. There are good mental health alternatives to gender-affirming healthcare, which address underlying issues rather than dodging them. Finally, there is always a more honest way to deal with gender confusion than the chemical sterilization and surgical mutilation of healthy young bodies. I thank you for your kind attention.
George, we didn't have time to play the 4 or 5 other doctors that were present at this panel when they made this announcement that also weigh in on the harms of so-called gender-affirming care. But what's truly sad about this, George, is that this statement that they just made is the minority report in a mainstream medical community. Now, these very courageous doctors are swimming upstream. They're fighting against the mainstream medical community that sees the profit motive in performing these gender-affirming care services, including puberty blockers. These are off-label drugs that people are making a lot of money off of, while they do incredible damage to our children. And as you heard from Senator Scott Wiener, it's none of a parent's damn business what these children believe. They belong to the LGBTQ caucus in their community. Well, George, if we're going to turn this ship around, we need courageous parents standing in the gap for their children. We also need courageous physicians and people that are part of the medical establishment who can see the danger of what's happening in the medical community and are willing to stand up against it. It sort of reminds me, George, during the pandemic, where there were so few doctors that were willing to raise a public voice against what we now know was a very dangerous medical protocol in giving the vaccines, an unproven vaccine, to so many different people. In fact, I don't know if you remember, George, the Great Barrington Declaration that was put together by world-renowned physicians saying, wait, hold on, we need to slow down a little bit about this and rethink if this is the right course of action. Well, these doctors from the American College of Pediatrics are taking a very courageous stand and need to be supported. But even more importantly, parents, you need to be aware of what's going on with your kids in the public school system and the forces rallied against them by our own state legislature in corrupting their emotional and mental well-being.
I agree, Mark. And in fact, Protect Our Kids indirectly, it has been supporting some of these doctors. We were actually a sponsor at the 2023 Christian Medical and Dental Association, and Dr. Andre Van Mol was there presenting to his colleagues. I was in the audience. It was like an 80-page Word document with like 300 footnotes. And this is pre-Cass report. I'm sure he's since then expanded his presentation. But, one interesting thing for parents from, my experience there that I share all the time, I have never been at a conference where somebody gave a presentation other than on a PowerPoint. And the PowerPoints, how usual professional organizations put them together, no more than 4 bullet points per slide, and things like that, right? Keep it very simple, right? Not too many words. Well, he actually just shared his screen directly from his computer, and he scrolled through those 80 pages of just evidence after evidence, proof after proof. And we have a copy of that. And so if any of our listeners want to get a copy of that, you guys can reach out to us. But that's the kind of bravery that we need from parents and from these doctors and medical professionals alike if we are to turn this ship around.
And so as a first step, parents, listen to the audience, if you're a concerned citizen and you don't have kids, but you're very concerned about what you see going on in the school system, we want to encourage you to go directly to the declaration that the American College of Pediatrics has made. It's the Doctors Protecting Children Declaration. We will provide a link to it in our show notes, but you can find it yourself. Just go to doctorsprotectingchildren.org and take the time to read it. It's not a quick read. It's not 80 pages, but they do take the time to give evidential support for their positions in the Declaration, and it's very worth reading, and it's going to arm you with the facts that you need when you're thinking about how best to challenge these terrible policies been put into place in California. And as the saying goes, what happens in California very quickly spreads across the nation. This is the state on the progressive vanguard of change, and including corrupting our kids. And so it's not going to stay here, George. As you know, this is going to creep across the country, and that process has already started in earnest, as noted by Protect Our Kids and other like-minded organizations. And so I would also, George, want to encourage our audience to be very careful when they go to the voting box in November about who they choose to represent their interests and the interests of our children in the public school system. Because depending on what you choose, it will have real-life consequences, not only for us now, but for future generations to come.
That's very well said, Mark. And I think that's probably all the time that we have here for today. Parents, please go to doctorsprotectingchildren.org. Also, we highly encourage you to go to POK's website, pok.org. Share all of the information from there with other folks, parents, teachers, pastors, your neighbors. We still need to get this word out. Even after over 5 years of doing this with POK, this is a huge country, and so many more parents need to get informed about the triple threat to our children in the public school system. If you want to partner with us and donate to our ministry, there is a donate button. If you want Mark or I to come and speak to your parent group or to your church, we will be more than happy to do that as well. Just click the request a speaker button that's on our front page. We're so glad that you are listening and supporting our ministry and that you share our information. We're all over social media as well, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. So please check us out, share our files, share our brochures, share our videos, and we would like to hear more from you. But until then, have a great rest of your day. Take care.
You've been listening to Say What, the radio ministry of Protect Our Kids, where they seek to inform and equip concerned citizens about the crisis in American public education and the forces working against our children. Join us at this same time every Saturday as attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. unpack the issues so that we can better safeguard our nation's children. And join Mark and George right here next week at this same time for another episode of Say What.